Tobin, welcome to the Manchester United podcast. How are you?
Great, how are you?
Yes, good, thank you. What has your day been like today? Tell everybody what you've been doing. I can see you're at the ground. Have you been training today?
So I'm out injured, unfortunately, but today's our double day. So had a morning session and in between sessions now, and we have our afternoon session following this.
How do double days compare to normal days? Are they tough?
They're long, I would say. But yeah, they're pretty tough. It's like when we get our high load in, both on and off the field. We have 2 double days a week. So on Wednesdays, it's our highest intensity, and then again on Fridays we have a double day, but it's a little bit lower.
How has life been for you since you arrived in Manchester? Obviously, usually when people move to a new country, you have time to go and soak up the atmosphere, see the city, see the suburbs, whatever it may be. For you, life was very different coming here. What's the last few months been like for you?
Yeah, I feel like I've said this over and over again. Obviously, because of the circumstances, I haven't really been able to enjoy the city like most, I think, because of the times. But this is kind of the new normal, and I feel really fortunate to be able to, have a job that forces me to be outside for a certain amount of hours, and just being active and moving and doing what I love. I feel really fortunate to be able to, play football during this time, when, so many don't necessarily have the same opportunities that they're used to.
Have you been in Manchester before now?
Not for football, yes. I played here for 2012 Olympics. I played in Old Trafford twice. But for like pleasure and to understand the city, as a footballer you see a lot of the world, but it's pretty much as a hotel and a pitch. Yeah. But it's been nice to kind of explore, and I feel like I've gotten to know the city, the ins and outs of the city pretty well. It's easy to manage when there's not a lot of people around.
I am going to just stop you there because you did say football, and I have watched some interviews with you, and I thought, I wonder, will she say football or soccer? And I'm sure this is a question you've been asked lots of times. Is football the term that you've always used since a child?
Pretty much since I could remember, I use football, and for obviously in the US, I'll say like American football for, our version of football. But yeah, I feel like it's the proper way to speak.
Is that because you watched a lot of European football maybe as a child? Did you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of kind of the influence, I grew up on the East Coast, so most of my football influence came from this country and other European countries. So really familiar with that. And then obviously just by watching the Premier League, and it's infectious.
We're going to ask you about your life and growing up. So it's nice that you've touched on it. I'm going to start with your name. Quite an unusual name, not a name we hear very much in England. Is that a popular name in America?
No, I don't know another Tobin.
Well, that's good. Good to be unique. Tell us where your name comes from.
It was my great-grandmother's last name.
Very nice. Do you like having a unique name?
Yeah, I mean, I've never had an experience with a different one, but I will say that I will say that I think it fits my personality. I don't know which happened first, but I guess the name. But I like having a unique name.
I'm sure there's lots of
Tobin,
little Tobins around in America now because of you.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah. Tobin, you grew up in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. What was that like as a kid?
It was awesome. I feel like New Jersey, I don't know like what the place is in the UK that kind of is the equivalent of New Jersey, but I think it gets like a lot of stick for certain things. But for me, I feel like I grew up like in a beautiful part of the country, and I feel like I had every opportunity to succeed there, and being right outside New York City, I felt like having that culture so close was really good and fun. And then from a footballing perspective, I feel like I grew up in the best area for development in terms of football. So, like I said, you don't really get to determine that when you're born, but I feel like for kind of like my football career, I was born into a pretty good place for that.
Where did the love of football come from? Are your family lovers of football? Your parents, grandparents?
No, none of the above. It just really came from me. I was attracted to the game at a young age and just kind of fell in love with kind of my relationship with the football. And I really identified from a young age with the sport, and it's all I wanted to do. I always say I wish I grew up in a country that has like deep-rooted football in that country, because it was I would say in terms of women's sports, it's very popular in the U.S., but in terms of having that history, we don't have that. We have other sports that are much bigger. So I really always looked to the other countries that had a deep-rooted history in the sport and kind of identified more with myself in that. And I really do think it was a unique case for me how deep my love was, since I didn't come from a country that was so kind of rooted in that history.
Did you get much opportunity to watch? Was there Premier League on the TV in America at that time for you to watch?
No, so when I was young, I kind of begged my parents to let me have like a TV in my room, and the TV didn't have like normal channels. It just had a VCR. I'm like totally dating myself right now. But we didn't have like football on TV like we do now in the US. Now in the US, you can pretty much watch any league on pretty mainstream channels, which I'm so jealous of for like kids growing up, because for me, it was like I had to go into my soccer magazine and pick out like the greatest Manchester United goals from 1998, and that's the kind of like education that I had to have, was putting in these VCRs of the greatest teams and the greatest players, and I would just watch that over and over again. But now it's, so much easier. And one of my favorite parts about living in Europe, and I played in Europe before, was just being able to watch football at the proper time that it's being played. Yeah. Because in the US, you're like waking up at absurd hours, and it's just different, when you get to finish your night with football. It's just like one of the best things ever.
That's very true. We probably take that for granted a lot. But what is the time difference in New Jersey?
Well, on the East Coast, it's like between 5, 6, 7, depending on the time changes. But on the West Coast, you're talking about waking up for a 4:30 game for the early matches, which is just that's ridiculous. A lot.
It's dedication.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a professional, Tobin?
Well, that didn't really exist. I always say my kind of life has been a pioneering kind of spirit because of the career choice. It's when I was born, women's professional soccer didn't exist. And so it was always just about kind of making the next team or, moving up with the national team and stuff like that. So it wasn't until later on in my life that reality was even possible. So I guess for most, young kids, they always have that kind of goal, but that was never my goal. It was just I loved playing football, and I wanted to keep playing, and I wanted to keep getting better, and wherever that kind of took me was where I wanted to go. And it's kind of all those things kind of just started happening as my career started evolving. And I think it's pretty powerful now that when, a little girl, now can dream of becoming a professional footballer, she has an example that's not a man, because those were all my examples growing up.
Yeah, of course.
Was you always good at school?
I think.
Did you have football at school?
No. We had recess, but no, we didn't have any kind of school sports until high school, which I think is college for you here. That's when you have like kind of school sports, but there's kind of like a divide between, because we have like school sports and then we also have like kind of club sports. It's a little different, but there's a lot of options.
You always played some sort of sport, though, I presume, at school, because you had the love of a lot of sports?
Well, I would say like I was always playing sports in general, but football was the only sport that I dedicated.
Only one for you.
Yeah, my life to.
So growing up through school, when was the moment when you started to think, you know, football could be the life for me? When do you think that moment came for you?
I don't think it ever did come. Even now, I don't really think that's the way that I think of it, honestly. I really think of it kind of as, you know, I dedicated myself to this craft that, you know, I love, but that obviously isn't something that you can do for the rest of your life as a player, as much as we'd all like to. So in that way, I always just assumed that football was just like kind of like a part of the path of my life.
And what did you want to do when you were younger? Did you have a career in mind? Obviously, you went to university, but did you have anything in mind that you wanted to do if it wasn't going to be football?
No, I only wanted to play football. I went to university to play football, and that was all that I have dedicated myself to. And obviously, the possibilities of, you know, making, you know, better teams, competing at higher levels, and winning, you know, trophies was all that was kind of on my mind and what I really wanted to do.
Tell us about going to college then. That was at North Carolina, is that correct?
Yes.
And what did you study there, and what was it? It was a scholarship, I presume?
Yeah, I would say I studied football, but my degree was in communication. I went to by far the best football school in the country, and, you know, my fellow Tar Heel and Alessia Russo, she also went there. Obviously, she just came from there, so it's always fun kind of talking about her experience there and what she liked about it, and for Americans, the collegiate system is really important to kind of your development, you know, as kind of an adult, and is really influential, like on your life. And for me, is one of the most influential times, and I got to play for one of the best coaches ever. So I feel really like it was a big part of my development in my career and as a person.
You won a few trophies there as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the expectation there. It's insane how many trophies that they've won, but I came in with a really special class, a really talented class, and you know, our goal was to win 4 national championships out of 4, and unfortunately, we only won 3 out of 4, and I think for most people, you know, they're like, wow, that's incredible, but we really did. Right when we came into school, we said, like, we're going to win 4 out of 4 at a time when, you know, women's soccer in the country was becoming much more competitive on the collegiate level. But yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
Do you look at that as disappointment then, that you only got 3 out of 4?
Yeah, I think well, for me personally in my career, I've always really had a high expectation of winning, and yeah, I do find it to be a disappointment because the pieces were there for sure.
And at that time, Tobin, you were involved in the international team as well, the international setup.
Yeah, so I grew up in the youth system since I was about 13 years old, made my way up and actually started playing with the senior team at a young age. And while I was in, when I was at North Carolina, I was able to compete in my first major tournament, which was the 2008 Olympics. And so, yeah, and then obviously been playing for the national team for a long time now. But if you
What was that like Sorry, Tobin, what was that like representing your country in the Olympics?
Yeah, it was incredible. I think it's funny because now I've played in like quite a few Olympics, so each one is very different, obviously because of the host country and stuff like that. That's why it's like so beautiful of a competition. But my first Olympics was obviously Beijing, and this was kind of like their big coming out to the world. And it was incredible, like especially for that being my first tournament. It just blew me away, just the amount of I don't even know, just like the show of it was incredible. And then obviously winning and just kind of having that experience as a young person, I think is important. You don't necessarily play the big role on the team that you will later play in your career, but I think that kind of experience is invaluable for you to continue growing and learning, not only what it's like to be a professional, but to have the expectations of your country like on your shoulders. I think is something really, really powerful, and it's a responsibility that's taken very serious for us on the national team.
How old were you, sorry, whenever you went there?
I was
Olympics?
19.
19, wow. That's very young.
When
isn't it?
when you was there, we had Wayne Rooney on our podcast a few weeks ago, and he said at the age of 16 he knew he was the best in the team. And we thought, wow, that's a little bit arrogant maybe, or cocky, so to speak. Where would you have been in the pecking order of the best in the team then, at an early age?
I don't even think I ever thought that. I think it's a little bit different when you join a team that is just like the most successful team in the world. It's hard to come in and say you're the best when they've clearly been winning without you.
Yeah.
For me, I was just a young kid that was super humble and thankful and wanted to learn and grow from the best players there were. So I don't even know where I was in the pecking order. Probably the very bottom. I probably got picked last for that team, I think with every kind of tournament and roster that you make, you hope to kind of move up and up.
Yeah.
I think that's actually one of the most important like parts of like growth as a player is kind of a natural progression. I think sometimes it's with the types of expectations for the team that we have, it would be a lot to have as a young player those expectations. But luckily for us, we've always had kind of the talent and experience to be able to have more of a natural progression.
Was there anybody who you looked up to as a kid growing up, or maybe 16, 17, thinking, wow, I'd love to be able to play like her or like him?
Like
did you have
the
idols?
player that I always say is Ronaldinho. That's the player that I looked up to. For me, like football was supposed to look and feel a certain way, and he demonstrated that kind of feeling that I always wanted to have on the pitch in the way that I wanted to entertain as well. And I will say I gravitated more to like South American, style of football.
Yeah.
But I was obviously heavily influenced by the European game just because of where I'm from.
Have you always played the same position, Tobin? Has that changed throughout your life?
I feel like the modern game like has changed so much. Like when I look back at like how I was being used and the positions that I was being played in when I was younger, I was more of a midfielder, I would say, for, probably longer than like half my professional career. And I would say as we started becoming like more of a fast-paced, like high, like risk reward, like players playing higher up on the field, I've been moved into more of a forward position, which has been a lot of fun. But I would say when I started my career, I was certainly more of a midfielder and more of a playmaker and a step back from the front line.
But you've always liked to have the number 7 on your back.
That kind of started happening as with the national team. Like, I love the number 7. I had the number 98 as a kid. It was just like a random story, but my first ever like club team when I was young that I got to choose my number for. I was a younger player and coming into a team that had already been established, and the coach asked me like, "Oh, what number do you want to be?" And I didn't really care, so I was like 9. And he was like, "Oh, 9's taken." And he was like, "What other number would you want to be?" And I was like, I couldn't even count at that point. I don't even think. I was like 8. And he was like, "Oh, 8's taken too." He was like, "Why don't we just make you 98?" And I was like, "Cool." And so I was actually 98 all the way through university. I wore that number, and it was a weird number, but I liked it. In terms of like positionally, like I always saw myself as a 7, and well, the way it goes on the national team is like these numbers are just like really hard to kind of establish yourself. They don't get like passed around by players. It's like you kind of have a number through your whole national team career. And so my first number that I played with in a major tournament was 13, and that was passed down to me from Christine Lilly. She actually was like, "Hey, I want you to wear, my number." And it was really a nice gesture, and I felt really moved because she was a player that I had massive amounts of respect for, but like I hated the number. I absolutely hated it. So I wore the number through that Olympics, because I couldn't really say like, no, thank you.
No.
And I actually, another player on the team after that tournament had, stepped away, and the number 17 was available. And Alex Morgan at the time had come to me and was like, "I would really love the number 13. Like, it was her number from a child." And I was like, please take it. This is great.
How good's that?
And the number 17 opened up, and it was the best number that I could have like thought at that point, with the kind of the players and the numbers that I like and where they were at in their career. So yeah, I took 17, and it's been a great number for me on the national team, but I've always wanted to wear the number 7, and it's hard when you like kind of get known for a number. But when I came to United, the number 7 and the number 17 were both occupied, and so I took 77, which I'm very, very happy with.
So you've got your 7, and you've got 2 of them now.
Yeah, I call it double 7s.
So it's all worked out perfectly. I'm going to go back a little bit to 2010. In that year, you were the first pick overall in the WPS. Is that correct? Do you remember that moment and what that was like for you? And if anybody is listening who doesn't understand the system, if you could just explain it to us in simple terms.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of this wild American thing that we do out of college athletics, where you then, when you become a professional, you get drafted, and obviously can go many rounds, but I think when you're playing college soccer, you are playing, I guess, to be drafted number 1. I think there's many better implications for, the higher paid sports, because it means a lot more. But I think it's more so for the pat on the back to say like, "Oh, good job, you were number 1."
Yeah, it's an incredible achievement though.
Yeah, it was. It was great, especially like I said. I really feel like my class was so talented, and even now, I'm still playing with some players in my class on the national team. So it was a great achievement, and something I had worked really hard for.
So did you get the choice? Do you get the choice to go to a certain club, or once they pick you, is that it?
Yeah, no, the way the draft works is like there's also team orders. So a certain team has the number 1 draft pick, and there's a bunch of crazy stuff that can happen, like trades and stuff like that, in order to for teams to get higher up. and the draft. But I was drafted to a new franchise, which was the Atlanta Beat in the WPS. And then obviously the WPS then folded like 2 years after that. So the league then changed to what is now the NWSL.
How far is Atlanta from where you were before? And from your hometown as well?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. So it's far from where I live. It's considered the South. I was fortunate because I actually have family that's there. So that was really cool to be able to spend time with family that I don't normally see. But it definitely culturally was very different than where I was from.
When you played for Atlanta, you picked up an ankle injury?
Yeah, so my first... pretty bad. I had to get surgery, and that was my first kind of experience as a professional. And it was also right before... So, sorry, I'm so bad with dates. So it was also right before I was... trying to make the 2011 World Cup team. Mm-hmm. So it was actually a decision that had to be made in order to kind of prioritize making that team, which I then was able to recover well and make that team. So that was really big. It's a little different with our kind of club national team system because our national team is very much prioritized over club, which is a little different. We spend a really good amount of time together. It almost feels more like a club team than a national team. And so I would say there's not really that same balance as you have here where, you show up for traditional FIFA windows and stuff like that. We really spend a good amount of time together outside of those windows in order to prepare for our tournaments.
That was obviously a big injury when you were younger, and sadly you're currently sidelined with an injury as we speak. Do you ever have moments where you question if you can come back from these setbacks?
I don't really kind of look at things as finite. I guess if anything, like I feel like those types of, I always say setbacks are setups for comebacks. And it's just like another, honestly, I really do think it helps develop perseverance, determination, having to struggle. Like, I think struggling and resilience are like such important characteristics for an athlete because you're choosing to play a sport where, I mean, if you've played as long as I have, you're going to have so many setbacks. And if you want to have a long and successful career, you're going to have to learn to, really persevere and change your perspective of things. And if you can actually kind of switch your mindset to looking at the positives and looking at your development from a different lens, it's actually extremely powerful. And you get to see the game from a different perspective.
Are you saying that now, because you're in your 30s, did you think the same way back then in your 20s? Or do you cope with things a little bit differently now that you are older and you do have a different perspective?
Yeah, I think obviously I have, like a little bit more wisdom now on these matters. But I do think like I had a good head on my shoulders. I had good people around me. I had people that really cared about me and were focused not just on like my career. I think it's more developing yourself as a person and being strong and independent. And ultimately, it was just self-belief in my dreams and what I felt like I was capable of doing as a footballer. And I don't think that ever wavered. And I think that was just from my passion and love of the game. I don't think there was anything that could really stop me from doing what I wanted to do.
So you came back from your ankle injury, and then as you touched on before, the WPS folded. There was a little bit of confusion around what was maybe going to happen. Did you worry about things at that time, where your life was going in football?
No, I don't think I really worry too much. It's not really my style. But I will say that that's when I was like, all right, like where is football going next? You know, I feel like I've always kind of had like one eye like a little bit further out as to like kind of the trends of things and the way that I wanted to push myself. I kind of felt like in a way I was a little like that kind of American soccer was getting a little stale for me, like that I needed a little bit of a change. I'd been kind of in the same kind of systems, hearing the same things for a while, and I think that's why it kind of came at a good point for me. So obviously the league folded and we had the 2012 Olympics, which this beautiful country hosted. And that was great. We did well. And then in that moment when, you know, there was kind of a gap between leagues, it was a great moment for me to do what I wanted to do, which was challenge myself and go overseas and learn and be around a different culture. Which was obviously just so expansive.
So you enjoyed that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was so, it's so different now that I've come here, but I think because of the language barrier and the culture is very different. And, you know, I was a lot younger and I was obviously by myself. I felt like it was such a challenge, like even little day-to-day things was such a challenge. And it was like, I woke up and, you know, the things that are so ready and like easy for you, it was like so exciting. Like every day was like a brand new day with like a million challenges. And I feel like my mind, like I just feel like my head was just like growing. And it was really, really cool. And it was challenging. It was hard for being far from home. And, you know, you have like so many obstacles, but in terms of an experience, I always, you know, try to encourage younger players to go overseas because it's just so eye-opening. You know, we learn the games completely different. Like we speak about things different. We train differently. And I was just able to take so much from my time there and really grow, mostly like as a professional, because up until that point, I feel like my kind of idea of like professional club soccer was very much like similar to my collegiate experience. It didn't necessarily feel like a job. It felt like something that, you know, I just like enjoyed doing. Mm-hmm. But when I went over to Europe was the first time that football for me felt like a job. And I really liked that feeling.
Did you speak any French at the time?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I had to. I had to learn as quickly as possible because PSG at the time didn't have. We only spoke French. My teammates, there were only a few teammates that spoke English, and other than like the internationals and just my coaches, they refused to speak English. So it was a very, very big learning experience.
How do you go in a dressing room then?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, you realize, well, thank goodness for like football because there's just like a common language. There's a common understanding, you know, like you know how things are supposed to work and feel, and like even in practice and stuff, like you catch on to like the language so much easier in football terms because you have something to compare it to. But then, like you said, like dressing room culture, stuff like that, it was way more difficult. You know, I think the internationals on that team, we really stuck closely together. We were a tight knit group because it's like when you can only speak to a few people, you know, you kind of hang on to those moments. But we were really challenged in terms of the language. And yeah, it was a ton of fun.
Tobin, whenever I look at your career and the dates, it just seems like every year is just, there's so much happening for you. You know, you just mentioned the 2012 Olympics, you're at PSG, 2013, you then go back to Portland. Like your career just seemed to have something exciting happening continuously. Did you feel that way at the time, or were you just thinking that this is just what I'm doing?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's my personality. I crave, like, I think I'm just a curious person, so I crave kind of like a new setting, a new challenge, a new opportunity, a new experience. And I feel like that's kind of what my football career has looked like. And I think because of the cyclical nature of, world championships, it's allowed for those kind of ebbs and flows for me to like experience a lot in the game. And I feel like I have experienced a lot, both, domestically and internationally, which I'm super thankful for. But I definitely feel like I'm always kind of looking for the next challenge.
The accolades on your career are absolutely incredible. I just want to touch a little bit more on your international career. The bond that you've had with your teammates over all of those years in the international setup must be incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, some of these players I've been playing with since I was like 12 years old, and you've grown up with them and seen them kind of evolve as people and evolve as footballers is really special. And then just in terms of like those experiences that we've been through together, like the major wins, the major losses, it really feels so much like a family. I mean, I've spent more time with these people than I have my own family, so they know me a lot better. But it's just so deep, those types of experiences. And, I'm lucky to have such incredible teammates to not only just play with, but to have supported me and vice versa. It is an incredible bond, what sport does, in terms of that.
And Maisie knows about this, but what's it like to always be the team to beat in those competitions? Does that bring a lot of pressure for you guys?
I don't even think we even think about it like that, because it's just been so normal. We always say that the greatest competition that we have is internally in our own squad. I mean, it's so hard to be, not only to have the success that we've had, from the outside, but to continue to be a part of a team that is just constantly like going for that next level, and to have that as an individual as well. The players that can hang in that environment for a long time, there's just such a mutual respect amongst the players that have been able to do that, because it's so incredibly hard and it's so incredibly competitive, and you have to almost get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's what it's like when you're the team. I don't think we ever kind of are like, we're always trying as a team to push our own barriers instead of just kind of playing against other teams. We're always seeing how we can evolve as a team. And the way that women's football is going in the world it's changing so quickly. So many more resources are being put into it. So that's constantly going to get harder. But it's like the team is just made to just push and evolve. And it's crazy.
And what you've done for women's football, just talking there of your mentality as a group. Tell us about the fight for equal recognition in the game, especially when it came to gender discrimination and pay.
Yeah, I think we have become synonymous with this fight. It's such a testament to the team and to the players, not just the current players, but the past players, is this torch that has continued to be passed down by each generation of leaders, is to continue to push the game forward, to create more opportunity. And for us, the reason why we're even able to do it is because of our success on the field. It's not like somebody can say, well, you should have won one more, We've won everything possible, and we continue to fight, and we've seen what it's done, for the sport and for other federations that can now have an example. And by pushing the ceiling, there's two ways, you bring up the bottom, but you also have to push the ceiling. And we constantly are trying to push the ceiling to bring up the bottom and be an example that people can point to and say, hey, like, we need this team has that. And it's important for us, and just not only in terms of sport, but worldwide, obviously gender discrimination, we're trying to fight, and it's important for us to be an example that all people can look to and feel inspired by. And it's funny because, just by us being excellent at what we do has given us such a big opportunity to be so much more than what I think we originally intended when we first started kicking a ball about.
You seem so, to me, you seem so chilled out and relaxed. Are you always like that? Or are you just forever driving on and wanting to better yourself? You just seem such a chilled out person. Do you get nervous before games or anything, or tournaments, or how do you look at games and stuff? You
No.
seem like that, horizontal.
I think that I'm very much like this. I would say on the field, people definitely see a different side of me than off the field. But no, I don't really have any of that. I think it's just like I feel such a comfortability in what I do in football that like I love games. I love that opportunity to entertain, to, you know, do what you've seen in your dreams every single night. You know, I relish that. And, you know, as I've gotten older and, you know, you don't see as much in front of you as what was behind you.
Sure.
I just like, I love games, like, and I love football, and that next opportunity I get to play, you know, it's just such an awesome feeling being able to do what you love and to kind of, I guess, express yourself in such a natural way.
So do you get nervous before games?
No, definitely not.
Not at all?
No.
No butterflies, just...
No. I actually, I'll tell you...
That's brilliant. I love it. I do. It's great.
What were you going to tell us,
Go on.
Tobin?
Oh, I was going to tell a little something that I do. I don't think I ever said this before, but before a national team game, I always do this thing during the national anthem, you know, when you put your hand over your heart. I always see how low I can get my heart rate, just for the fun of it.
Just to see how calm you actually are.
I don't know.
What have you got it down to?
Oh, well, I mean, like, I obviously don't have the numbers, but
No.
it's just something that,
That's
like,
so cool.
I just think it's, like, a cool thing to, you know, be able to take an experience that's supposed to be, like, you know, so, like, we make up these things in our minds and these feelings, and we attach so much meaning onto things, but to try to, like, kind of make something seem, like, so, like you're walking out to training, you know, I think is like a really cool thing.
So
That's
now
so cool.
every time everybody watches you
Yeah.
Hopefully
during
that
the
gets
national
edited.
anthem,
That
We
can
know
get
what you'll be
edited.
doing.
That's class. That's brilliant. That's so good.
you talked about your dreams there, Tobin, in your career. Were Manchester United ever in your dreams? Obviously, you know, the professional team wasn't around for Man United when you were a little girl, but was that part of your dreams in the last few years?
Yeah, so I definitely, so in kind of like my one eye looking a little bit out there, I definitely wanted to come over to this league, and I was thinking later in my career I would do it, and obviously because of the circumstances, everything, you know, changed, and I was given this awesome opportunity, and certainly I wanted to experience football over here. Obviously, Manchester United's team is relatively young, and I remember, you know, reading that they had gotten a women's team, and I had actually told my teammate, like, I was like, this is just such a game changer. Like, a club like this, such a massive club coming into the league is just like such a signal, like, about the game over here and the change and the growth. And that really interested me. And it's been a really, really like fun time learning about the league, and, you know, obviously the weight of the badges over here are just immense.
How did you move to United come about?
You know, it came about relatively quickly. When everything kind of was shutting down, and obviously like the league was, because our league is like kind of a different season. We play through the summer as opposed to vice versa. So when the league was shutting down, and then you guys were obviously going to be starting up in September, I had wanted to see if there was any interest out in Europe in general, and there was some interest, and obviously it's a big moving overseas is big no matter what, but moving overseas during a pandemic adds a whole nother layer onto things when there's so much uncertainty in the world, and I had to just trust and have a lot of faith that this was where I was supposed to be, and I had a really good feeling about it. I had asked around a bit and had heard some really good things, positive things that I want to hear as a player in terms of aligned with who I am and the type of kind of ambition I have. And it's one of those things that you kind of just have to trust that it's going to be good for your career. And coming over, it's been fantastic.
How was your conversation with Casey then?
It was.
Don't worry, we can edit all this. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, it was actually. Well, you guys obviously know how Casey is. She's so dry and like matter of fact and like straight to the point, and it was definitely interesting because I feel like. For in the US, like I feel like we're just like a little bit more kind of like I don't even know if this is true, like dramatic and like about things. So we'd be like, oh, like this is the best thing ever, and we're gonna like do all these things for you, and you're gonna like love it. And I just feel like Casey's just like, straight to the point. Like this is who we are. This is what we want to do. This is how I feel like you can contribute. And it's like I come from a place that's like very blue collar, very like you put your head down, you get to work, and that's one of the like fundamentals of how I am as a professional is I'm very dedicated to my craft, and like I've never felt like I've arrived, and I really felt in that moment that there was just I don't want to be treated any differently than a young player, a player that hasn't had the chances that I've had to develop. Like I want to come in, and I want to come in with that same, bright eyes to learn and to grow. And I felt like when I spoke to her, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to do this for you and we're going to do that for you. It was like, this is the team, this is how we are, and this is how you can fit in. And I really liked that, and I really respected it.
When did you get to meet your teammates? I presume that you quarantined for 2 weeks.
Yeah, those 14 days. Those 14 days were really hard.
Oh my goodness, I'm sure.
So yeah, I think like especially when you come over, like you just want to kind of start, and there was just a bit of a pause. And I remember the first week of training was actually during an international break, so almost half the team, was away on international duty, which actually was quite nice because I felt like we came in and we got to meet the team as a smaller group, and really got to like kind of get our feet wet and figure everything out, and it was like a little bit more intimate. And then all the players came back, and the dressing room here is just incredible. The players are, I mean, from day one, Chris and I just kind of looked at each other and we were like, wow, this is super special. We had never experienced anything like the feeling that we had and the reception that we had from the players and from the staff. And that's a really nice feeling to have when you've just completely moved your whole entire life to a different place.
Yeah, of course. What made it special about your teammates, about the welcome? What was so special about that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's just the people. And at first, when you come to a new place, you feel like people are just putting on a good face for you, but then, when you start ripping away the layers and there's just like, it just doesn't look as good anymore. But
did you have an initiation?
I wouldn't say as much as an initiation, but Casey always does.
Did you have to sing?
She's like known for these team activities kind of that she does. And I remember one of the first kind of big interactions we had with the team was like one of these activities where, you kind of break off into groups and you have to do things that like, you have to stand up and be a little bit uncomfortable. And I feel like it was one of those initiation type moments where everybody's like, oh, I wonder how they'll react to these types of situations, and it was a fun kind of welcoming.
What did you have to do?
I think this one was like you had to like get up and draw pictures or get up, and I don't think there was singing involved. I'm not sure, but
I think you would remember if you had to get up and sing.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually what it is, so you're kind of prepared for that.
Do you have a go-to song?
I don't. I don't even know what I think I did Adele Hello, the last song I ever had to sing.
Oh.
That's a difficult one.
That's why you do it, You just have to be like...
Yeah.
It's impossible. Yeah.
The thing is, everyone's going to sing along to that one, so I can understand why you've chosen that one. Everyone knows the words.
Yeah, it's true, and I think it would have been even more powerful here because, she's such an icon here.
So you settled in with your teammates well and the coaching staff, but when you finally made your first appearance against Brighton back in October as a sub, what was that feeling like for you?
Yeah, I think it was I was so happy to finally play a game. It had been so long, and just to, there's just something about, you experience this with injury too, like when the game has been taken away from you for some reason, obviously a pandemic I hadn't experienced before, but when the game's been taken away from you, your first kind of like feeling back is just like euphoric in a way. You're just like, oh, all is right, like my feet are on the ground, like I'm running around. And yeah, so I think there was just like such a like emotional, like, I guess like joy to that experience. And also like, I feel like when those first games back, it's almost like you just want to kind of check it, like first game back, check, and then you can kind of just like go.
So that was your first appearance, but your first goal came against West Ham. And that month you got nominated for the goal of the month. You must have really felt at that time, right, I'm here, I'm settled, I'm doing what I do best.
Yeah, I think it's still, it was still very much a learning of, how am I going to fit in with the team? How am I going to make the team successful? How do I fit in here? And that's, going through things in practice and figuring out, and then in the game, not doing maybe the right movement or not finding the right spaces that everybody is used to playing in, and kind of like almost getting more things wrong than right. And it's like once you start to like get the right things and start doing then more things right than wrong, and kind of get on the same page as your teammates and the coaches and the way that kind of football is played here and kind of the way the opponents are, that's when it starts to kind of feel good, because you're like, okay, that was the right thing, and that's what I enjoy doing. Like I love kind of that like problem solving in football, to figure out how to help the team and how to use my strengths to be successful. So obviously the first goal is always like one of those things where you're like, all right, that was right.
Mm-hmm.
Tobin, it's looking at the squad, it is a young squad. Obviously you're 32, you're the elder state person in the squad. Do you look at that as do you look to yourself now and think, well, I have to pass all my experience back over to the young kids now? Or do you just think, just let them get on with it? And do you become the senior pro there?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually the first team that I've ever been the oldest player on. So I think that was definitely a nice introduction. The eldest elder, I really like that one. But yeah, it is a young...
I was being kind to you.
Yeah, it is a young squad. I think I do a bit of that naturally.
Looking at the experience you've had over your career, World Cup, Olympics, winning things, you just can't buy that in any squad.
Yeah, I do think that I'm not so much of like a tell person like, oh, back in this World Cup, this happened. It's just not really my style. But like I do believe in, teaching and helping. And, if I see a player that I don't want a player to go down a path that I've seen before that I know doesn't work, or when I see something where I'm like, oh, you can do better. Like, I love encouraging my teammates. I love, seeing them do something like well for the first time and seeing them evolve. Like, even in my short time here, I've seen so many players evolve so much, which it's just such a cool feeling. It's definitely, when you're older, I think you enjoy it more.
Of course you do, yeah.
But yeah, I hope that, all the little pieces that, for me, I always watched and I studied the older players that I admired, because I wanted to be just as successful, if not more. And I hope people are taking those little bits and enjoying that time.
Sorry, we are going to let you go. Just before you do go, I know obviously it's been totally different for you without fans, but has Manchester United lived up to the expectations that you had of it before you arrived?
Certainly. I mean, I don't really know football without fans. It's really difficult for me emotionally. I think most footballers right now, it's really hard. But in terms of my experiences here, it has completely lived up to it. And, more so, it would be great to add, those things that's been taken away. But I think we're all thankful to be able to watch and to play the sport that we love so much.
Tobin,
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Take care.